Good day, everyone. For this presentation, we will be analyzing a case that concerns the health and environmental issues of the residents of Flint, Michigan, the water crisis on Flint. For this case analysis, we will be tackling about the summary of the case, the main problems of the case, the ethical issues identified, and the concepts and tools used to identify the ethical issues, as well as the courses of action, the chosen course of action, and the reason for choosing that course of action. Now, this is Miss Candelaria for the summary of the case and the main problems of the case.
So until now, Michigan is infamously known for the man-made crisis that affects the lives of thousands of residents in the city. This man-made disaster is known as the Flint water crisis. So now, let me tell you first what transpired during that time and help you understand how massive this problem is. We will also discover the main problem, the people behind it, and what drove them to such an extent. So now, let's proceed. Ever since 2011, Michigan was already a financially challenged city with nearly 98,000 people living below the national poverty line. In 2013, as the distressed community of Michigan was experiencing financial downfall, hence in dire need to cut the city cost, Michigan Governor Rick Snyder appointed an emergency manager to resolve the issue. As a solution, they looked at the cheaper alternative. They temporarily pumped water from the Flint River until a new water pipeline was built from Lake Huron. The alarming thing about this resolution is that even though the river water was highly corrosive, the officials failed to treat it and insisted it was safe. Soon after implementing, in April of 2014, residents started complaining about the water quality. Many residents reported that the supplied water from their taps looked, smelled, and tasted foul. Despite Flint's residents bombarding the city with complaints and requests for assistance, they ended up enduring the worsening crisis for well over a year before a governmental response finally began to trickle in. In February 2015, residents contacted the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and complained about the discolored water. The response came to light only after a study was conducted in the fall of 2015 by researchers at Virginia Tech and with the help of the residents. In here, the study revealed that out of the water samples collected at 252 households, nearly 17% of the citywide lead levels had spiked from 7 times to more than 30 times the maximum allowable lead levels or the federal action level of 15 parts per billion, the level at which corrective action must be taken. Additionally, more than 40% measured above 5 parts per billion of lead, which the researchers considered an indication of a severe problem. To top it all up, further findings by Flint pediatrician Mona Hannah Atisha in September 2015 revealed that the incidence of elevated blood levels in children citywide had nearly doubled since 2014 and nearly tripled in specific neighborhoods. She noted, "Lead is one of the most damning things you can do to a child in their entire life course trajectory." So according to AP report, a meeting was held between Mike Glasgow, the one who supervised the laboratory at the water treatment plant, with Michigan Department of Environmental Quality or MDECQ District Engineer Mike Brisby and a consulting engineer. In here, they discussed the problems of monitoring and maintaining phosphate levels in the water in the system. Given their duties and responsibilities, each of them should have understood the problem. Indeed, it is technically correct that there is no need to monitor phosphate, as said by Brisby. However, it is only correct if there is no MDECQ requirement to add or monitor phosphate. Given the sudden comment by Brisby, the two water treatment engineers were both caught off guard. However, instead of just saying something, they remained silent and just accepted it. This may be due to the implied cost savings rather than the challenging it as a questionable engineering practice. After the crisis was exposed, the residents of Flint have aptly cast blame, and dozens of civil lawsuits, as well as unprecedented criminal charges, have been filed. In early 2016, throughout the investigation, a total of 15 people were charged as criminally responsible for causing or contributing to the crisis. And on the 12th of January 2021, the AP News reported that former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, his health director, and other ex-officials have been told that they were being charged after a new investigation of the Flint water scandal. So, for the main problem of the case, in the Flint water crisis, the problem relates to the environmental injustice and poor decision making. The impression is that the financial pressures drove them to make an irrational decision, rather than challenging the comment made by Presby as a questionable engineering practice. So the crisis then gives rise to the importance of democracy, especially regarding the public's health. And as for the water quality, public health agencies should be involved instead of just the city's official decision. Furthermore, implementing the solution for the city's financial problem was deemed the primary problem and not the public health code structure. The problem addresses the failures in implementation and deploys proper agencies and professionals for the matter. Given that the issue concerns the public's health, the implementation should not be overlooked. Instead, it should be the top priority.
Now that we already have the background of the case as we tackled earlier the summary and the main problems of the case, let us try to dig deeper as we talk about the ethical issues of the case. So now, do you think that the ethical issues here are injustices, poor decision making, or health problem? We will see then.
First on the list is that the city began pumping water from the Flint River. Even subsequent development causes the water to significantly degrade, which resulted in a higher level of chlorination for disinfection. This untreated water from Flint River causes health issues such as fecal coliform bacteria to the residents of Flint, Michigan. Now, this untreated water from the Flint River that causes health issues was treated using an increased level of chlorination that is risky to the public. One of the possible treatments of this highly chlorinated water was to the addition and maintaining of the phosphate levels, but the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality District's Mike Presby cost down and helped the water treatment and neglected the idea of treating highly chlorinated water through the monitoring and maintaining the phosphate levels, and even labeled it as a necessary treatment. But the water treatment engineers did not oppose nor question the said statement, even if they knew that this treatment could possibly prevent the development of the corrosive conditions. Because of the implied cost cutting of the allotted financial cost due to the financial pressures of the bankrupt city, the water treatment engineers made an irrational decision, which is to accept the idea or the verbal statement of the regulator for considering monitoring and maintaining the phosphate level as a necessary treatment. This irrational decision of the water treatment engineers resulted to another ethical issues by allowing the highly corrosive water to flow to the household through the aging municipal water systems. Evident in corroding pipes, increasing water leaks, and with the leaching lead exposing residents, specifically the young ones, to be exposed in harmful levels of lead.
So as we have learned in Module 1, a chemical engineer has a code of ethics that he or she needs to adhere to. As a lot of chemical engineers do work in a water treatment plant, we need to learn what is ethical as we may be working in this industry in the future. And now, I'll present the relevant sections in the CH154 Code of Ethics that are applicable to this scenario. Section 7 of the CHE Code of Ethics states that the chemical engineer
shall be mindful of the safety and convenience of the public at all times, and shall make every effort to remedy or bring to the attention of his client or employer any dangerous defect in the equipment or structures or dangerous conditions of operation which come to his knowledge. So in this scenario, the engineer did not clearly consider public health when he decided to neglect the necessary water treatment needed in order to reduce costs. He also had knowledge that failing to monitor phosphate levels would lead to corrosion in the piping system. But despite this, he did not make any effort to inform this to the government or to propose a solution to the problem. He simply just allowed the problem to continue, and it became much worse over time. Meanwhile, Section 11 states that the chemical engineer shall clearly present the consequences or risk that will arise if his professional judgment or work for which he is responsible is overruled. In this case, Mike Glasgow failed to present the possible health risks associated with improper water treatment. As he was instructed not to monitor the phosphate levels, he should have argued that it would be a threat to public health. For ethical concepts, we could use three approaches. First is the utilitarian approach, in which the engineers should consider the well-being of the residents of Flint, Michigan. In this approach, we should maximize the overall well-being. In this case, conducting the necessary water treatment would provide the most good, especially in the long term, as clean water is vital to public health. Next is the rights for persons approach, in which we should act a way that will respect all humans and treat them equally. In this case, all persons should have the right to clean water. The golden rule could also be applied to this approach, as the engineers would not want a toxic water in his house. Last is the virtue ethics approach. To recall, Aristotle defined virtue as the middle point between two vices. In this scenario, conducting sufficient water treatment serves as the middle ground between sacrificing public health by not treating water and wasting government funds by excessively treating water.
Now that we already have had the ideas on what are the ethical issues present in the case, which is the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, let us now focus on the tools used in order to analyze such ethical issues. Now, first on the line is the performing a life analysis. The ethical implications of technology fall into two analyses. First is the hard impacts, which include the physical effects of the environment, health, and safety, as well as the soft impacts, which include the effects on social realities and ideals such as justice, equality, individual rights, and identity, among others. Among the two, the environmental health and safety consequences are frequently addressed concurrently. Now focusing on the hard impacts, first is on the environment. For the environment, state authorities fabricated records and fake tests in order to deceive the United States Environmental Protection Agency (EPA) about the true quantity of lead in Flint's water. Next is the health. Cost-cutting measures should never take precedence over health and safety concerns. Next is the safety. The residents expressed worries about the water's color, taste, and odor shortly after the transfer, as well as the variety of health complaints, including skin rashes. Now let us hear Mr. Ramos for other tools used in identifying such ethical issues.
One tool that could be used to analyze ethical issues, particularly environmental issues, is life cycle analysis. This is further discussed in Chapter 7 in the book Engineering Ethics, Concepts and Cases, 6th edition by Harris et al.
So according to the life cycle analysis, Keeping the pollution just within the set regulations is not enough in protecting the environment. We must protect the environment not only because we want to abide by the law, but because we care for Mother Nature. This tool is also a cradle to grave analysis of the environmental impact of a product or a process, meaning that we analyze its entire life cycle, starting from raw materials up to disposal. While this tool is commonly utilized in the production of goods, this can also be used in processes. And now, we will apply this tool to the given scenario by showing the four phases of the life cycle analysis. First is the goal and scope. And obviously, the goal is to provide clean and treated water to the citizens of Flint, Michigan. Then, we will now go to inventory analysis, which identifies the relevant input and output of the water treatment process. The input is the water from the Flint River and the phosphate treatment. As for the phosphate rocks are mined from underground deposits. For the third phase, we must assess the environmental impact of the process, which in this case is water treatment. Phosphates are not toxic to people or animals unless present in very high concentrations, such as when it reaches 1000 milligrams per liter. The use of phosphate prevents corrosions in pipes and fixtures, which could then prevent corrosive water from reaching houses. However, it must be noted that the operation of wastewater treatment plants also gives greenhouse gas emissions, which, as we know, are harmful to the environment. Phosphates are also a non-renewable resource that takes 10 to 15 million years to form. The last phase is interpretation, in which we need to evaluate the first three phases. This could simply be done by conducting studies that will measure water quality and determine if phosphate treatment is effective for the water in Flint. If the treatment is not effective, then other water treatments could be employed.
And now, we need to learn what actions may be taken in order to prevent such a disaster from happening again.
The first suggested action is to increase government budget allocation for environmental protection, as cost cutting is the main root and underlying cause of the disaster. Next, there should be a national standard for water treatment that will require the monitoring of phosphate levels and other water quality parameters. The maximum concentration of contaminants should be set, and there should be a penalty if it is not followed. Lastly, there must be an external government agency that is not affiliated with the city monitor water quality. As we can see here, the engineers being affiliated with the state of Michigan allow them to neglect water treatment in order to reduce costs.
As we all know by now, most governments, big industries, or let alone individuals do not prioritize the well-being of the environment that much. And we can see its impacts on our climate. So we're more likely going to reach a point where these damages become irreversible. And in most cases, cutting down costs on an environmental aspect could easily make a government or a company more profitable. However, the effects of cutting down costs with the expense of the environment may not seem obvious at first, but in the long run, it will have significant impacts on nature and the well-being of people. As can be seen on the Flint water crisis, wherein their government decided to cut down costs by pumping untreated water from the Flint River. For our chosen course of action, we suggest that the government increase their budget allocation for environmental protection. Government budgets seem to always underallocate their budget towards the environment. And The addition of regulations toward environmental protection can also be of help, although politicians seem to always, let's say, they always find ways in bending rules or finding loopholes. Thus, we suggest that the government increase their budget towards environmental protection. Now, increasing the government budget towards the environment can have multiple positive impacts toward a certain place and the people around it, which was observed by Onofre et al., where they investigated developing countries in Europe that increased their budget towards the environment, and they seen improvement in environmental conditions, which led to a better quality of life. Another study done by Chang et al. Observed that Asian countries that increased their budget towards the environment were seen to have boosted their energy efficiency and were able to significantly lessen CO2 emissions. Now, throwing money at a problem cannot solve it instantly. So, for this case, we also suggest that environmental considerations should be integrated in other sectors of the government, such as health, infrastructure, and transportation, so that the budget allocations or financial decisions will be much more sustainable.
We have discussed and described the situation. We have looked into the ethical and legal repercussions. We have given our opinion on what courses of action would be appropriate and should be taken. Now, we shall talk about the reasons for reaching this conclusion. All things considered, the root cause of the situation was the attempt of the city to cut expenditures. However, if the government had an increased allocation towards environmental protection, such matters would have been resolved, as the now new increased budget would give funding to the city to properly ensure the safety of the Flint River and subsequently neutralizing its corrosivity. Furthermore, along with the monitoring and treating of the river water, the budget may extend to the quality of pipes that the city installed, as poor quality pipes tend to contaminate the area and potentially the groundwater, as stated in the Handbook of Groundwater Development. With higher quality pipes, leaching should have been decreased, thus the total number of affected citizens would have decreased as well, leading to fewer casualties. Thus concludes the reasoning behind choosing the course of action.